too, and creatures are attacking. This is insane. So looks like both players have Vendilion Click, and because of the new legend rule, both clicks are able to be in play and attack each other.
Yeah, and that's a click coming into the red zone here for VanMeter. So across for 3, both players kind of actually damaging themselves here. Now, there's a little bit of a difference here in these two Miracle decks. Lossett, I guess, he kind of sets the stage for Miracles. When everyone goes towards Miracles, they go towards his list. He's got 3 Vendilion Click. He's got a Venser, Shaper, Savant in his main deck, a Snapcaster Mage. Not sure how many of those are in the deck after sideboard, but he's more of a Entreat the Angels, Chase the Mind Sculptor fan. VanMeter has stopped her Foundry and Sword of the Meek.
Yeah, he has stopped the Foundry Sword of the Meek. He also has 2 copies of Stoneforge Mystic, so he can find the Sword of the Meek if he needs to, but he also has a Batterskull to find as well. So basically a Miracle deck with a couple of copies of Stoneforge for that package, which is a pretty interesting take on the deck.
One thing that Lossett has this weekend too, if you of course track him while we're doing open series events, you know that there's always some minor changes to his deck. Sometimes you'll see a Glacial Fortress in there when people are playing Choke. He's got 2 Mystic Gates. Sometimes he's got a Baneslayer Angel or 2 in the sideboard, which, if you ask Patrick Sullivan, he's been absolutely decimated by before. But he actually has, and this is not a typo, 1 Red Elemental Blast and 1 Pyroblast in his main deck.
And that's not that crazy considering the fact that, 1, if you're playing against a non-blue deck, you can brainstorm it away.
Yep.
But 2, blue decks are pretty popular in Legacy.
Oh my gosh, I don't know.
I'm not sure we have not had 2 non-blue decks. Actually, that's not true. We had Death and Taxes in the lands.
Yeah,
that was in the feature match.
I don't know if you walked, on your break, I don't know if you walked around very much. Here's a Batterskull from VanMeter, but I was just walking around to see, what the name players are playing and what some people I'm not really, familiar with are playing in, and just seeing just blue mana everywhere.
Yeah.
Absolutely everywhere. Kurt Spies is one of the few players. I know you said you had Death and Taxes versus lands, but those are 2 of the few players that are not playing blue here.
Yeah, and who wouldn't want to play blue, considering you get to play cards like Snapcaster Mage and Brainstorm?
The blue cards they're ridiculous.
So Joe Lossett hard cast and Entreat the Angel last turn, but he got trumped by Chris VanMeter's Batterskull.
VanMeter, you saw his hand, he's got 2 fetch lands in there, so he's kind of all in on those lands. Lossett's going to play a Counterbalance, play a Scalding Tarn. And you see his hand right now, he has a Terminus, something else, and he's just not going to attack this turn. So VanMeter is going to untap. With his Batterskull, he'll take a draw. Let's see what he finds. It's a copy of Brainstorm.
Yeah, so Joe doesn't really have an answer to the Batterskull. Again, he can cast Terminus, but that would only reveal the Germ token. And he blindly hits a Brainstorm of his own to counter Chris VanMeter's Brainstorm. So pretty lucky flip there from Joe.
Oh, that Counterbalance. What a fun, magical card. Everyone's just having a ball on the left side of the table. As VanMeter's Brainstorm does get countered, which he obviously needed quite a bit with those 2 lands in his hand. Now he has to figure out how to manage Batterskull in this situation. Going to start by playing a Flooded Strand.
So it's interesting here. It's like both players, I would say that if you look at this board, Chris probably has the advantage right now because that Batterskull is difficult for Joe to deal with. However, Joe does have a Counterbalance in play, plus he has a Brainstorm on the top of his deck and a Snapcaster in play in his hand. So even though things look good for Chris technically on the board, you got to like Joe's chances.
Yeah, it gets ugly pretty fast here. VanMeter's going to sacrifice this Scalding Tarn. Looks like he's going to move down to 12, I believe. Maybe he gained a little bit of life. We'll make sure that our life totals are correct here. But he's going to go searching on a land. I wouldn't be too surprised, Joseph, if he actually moves the Batterskull over to the Vendilion Click.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that way, you can basically start attacking with your click next turn, not worry about it trading with Joe's click. And now Joe is going to have to probably pull the trigger on the Terminus in his hand, but he does have that Brainstorm, so it's going to be easier for him.
Brainstorm's going to go to the grip. And he's going to start by casting the best card in Legacy, which actually doesn't pain me to say. I respect Brainstorm. I don't have any interest in casting it, but I respect it.
Wow, so he hits a Flooded Strand, a Sensei Divine on top, and another Brainstorm. So great hit there. And it looks like Terminus will get placed on top of his library.
Well, Miracling's easy.
Miracle's so easy. What a great mechanic.
All you have to do is Brainstorm, you find a top, then you set it up, now you play the top.
So there's Sensei's Divine on top, Counterbalance, Sensei's Divine on top, giving people headaches since 2002.
It's not so bad. With Abrupt Decay kind of hanging around, and I expect to see a lot of those on camera over the course of this weekend because Bug has been tearing things up as VanMeter is going to draw a card here.
Yeah. Oh, and he draws a counterbalance of his own. But again, let's see if it can even resolve through top counterbalance. We know that Joe does have, I think, a Terminus and a land on top of his dot.
Joe's going to block immediately with his Vendilion Click. VanMeter is going to gain 7 life and push himself up to 23. We'll see if he tries to resolve the counterbalance, as you mentioned.
Yeah, and the life doesn't really matter that much in this matchup. Eventually, one of these players is going to get a dominating board.
Yep.
Usually, Jace the Mind Sculptor comes to play.
Time to spin. There's a Terminus. There's a Flooded Strand. Last one was an Island.
Wow, so pretty bad top there, but he does have a sack land, I think.
He does have a Tarn out there. He also has a Brainstorm as well. See if he wants to sacrifice this Tarn right now before he goes. Well, he's already drawn his card. I take that back.
Yeah.
So he's going to spin maybe his top. Maybe he'll Brainstorm. We'll see. It's actually kind of fun watching Joe because I always feel like I'm learning something when I watch him play this deck. He is very surgical. The only issue that he has when he plays this deck is sometimes it just takes a little too long for him to win. He gets a draw a lot of the time, but the deck does take forever to win, to be fair.
Yeah. And it looks like he might have had a Vendilion Click on top of his library, which could be interesting because it's a way for him to snag the Batter Skull.
And he says, in your draw step. So I think you were right, my friend.
Oh, wow. He's not going to like this, though.
Yeah, Chris drew a Stoneforge, I think.
Yeah, so you could take the Batter Skull, but he's going to be able to find it.
Hey, Chris could have something break his way. You see a big smile on the 4th-ranked player's face. There's a Stoneforge, there's a Batter Skull, and there's a counterbalance. And, of course, top is on top of Lossett's deck.
So the good news for Joe, though, he has a Brainstorm and a Snapcaster in his hand. So he could actually cast Brainstorm, put the Snapcaster on top, and that'll counter both the counterbalance and the Stoneforge.
Yep.
Unfortunately, he was going to have to use the Scalding Tarn, so he's going to lose his Sensei's Divining Top. But I think he's more than willing to do that, given the fact that, you kind of want to counter both Stoneforge and counterbalance.
Yeah, given the texture of VanMeter's hand, it feels a little bit risky, but at the same time, if Joe deems those cards to be very important, then I think, that option is a good one. So first things first, what to do with this Vendilion Click, which is, okay, put Batter Skull to the bottom, and we know a mystery card's coming here for VanMeter, so this should be interesting.
Yeah, because if the Stoneforge resolves, counterbalance is resolving.
Yeah.
Or he might lead with counterbalance, actually.
See a Plains just the draw here for VanMeter, so nothing of interest there. And I think VanMeter is kind of plotting over the decision that you talked about, which is which 2-drop do I lead with first? Even though I'm pretty sure, if this is VanMeter's thinking, I'm pretty sure they're just going to resolve because, all he's got is Tarn and top's on top of his deck.
Oh, and I think he used a Brainstorm that was revealed already earlier in the game off that blind flip. So I think he's not going to put him on.
Oh, no. His hands, yeah. You're right, yeah, because he used it already.
Yeah, this is his second Brainstorm.
Yeah, that's correct.
So, yeah, it looks like Chris does lead with the counterbalance, which I like because this gives him the option of casting the Stoneforge next turn if counterbalance doesn't resolve.
Yeah.
Which, again, with the top no longer in play, is certainly possible.
Lossett going to use that island here as Brainstorm, as you did mention. So we're doing a nice job of predicting the future. Going to add couple of cards to the grip. It looks like it may have been. Okay, there's definitely a spell.
And there's a top.
Okay. Well, here's the thing. If it was this easy, I would play Miracles.
I honestly don't understand why everyone's doing this thing.
Revealing Snapcaster Mage.
This might be the greatest thing I've ever seen in my life.
Chris going to look at the graveyard and say, how do you keep doing this?
If I was Joe, I would never not play Miracles either.
Trust me, he doesn't ever not play it. So,
wow, so a great Brainstorm there from Joe. He counters the counterbalance with Snapcaster Mage, draws the Snapcaster Mage for the turn. He has a top now, which he can play. And
his next card down is
Entreat.
Yeah.
Yep, so this game could be over next turn.
Joe going to play the top before passing the turn back. And his Entreat right now, because the Miracle cost, if he were to do it at the end of turn, would be for 4 Angels. That's 16, 17, 18, 19. Even though it's not going to be exactly until next turn, it's a dominating board presence as VanMeter is going to draw his card for the turn. He draws a copy of Brainstorm, which to Chris looks like a dead one, but in reality, it isn't.
If I'm Joe, I don't think I Entreat. Not yet. No? You don't need to. You got top counterbalance and click and play. Your opponent has nothing. You know he has a Stoneforge in his hand. There's no reason to. Just you can wait a turn. I think you just want to make sure that you have total domination. So you have that Snapcaster for your Brainstorm. You have active top. I would play it slow, I think.
Chris going to start with the Brainstorm. See, given that he started with this, now Joe can actually make this move of, okay, I'm going to draw a card with my top. Because he knows the other card's Stoneforge. I'm going to Entreat And now that's on the stack. Now, Joe can stack the fetch line, obviously, but I think he'd rather just entreat for 3 and then counter the brainstorm with the top and then draw the top next turn. But obviously, it's his call how he wants to play it. And he's just going to do it for 3. Leave the fetch land in play. He's got top on top of his library for the counterbalance trigger, the counter the brainstorm. And when you have 3, 4, 4 angels and Villian click, how scared of a Stoneforge Mystic are you really?
Yep, that's true. So now basically VanMeter's left with nothing but a Stoneforge and a Batterskull. He'll be able to get both in play potentially this turn. But yep, I'm with you. It looks like he's just going to go for it here, and he's going to have basically Chris on a turn two-turn clock.
Now, my question here is, what kind of backdoor outs does Chris have? Like, you know, if he's going to cast Stoneforge Mystic now because he knows that he can, the big question now is, does he go get Batterskull, or does he still have Sword of the Meek in his deck to be able to find Thopter Foundry? Because Thopter Foundry plus Sword of the Meek actually does a nice job of fogging this stuff.
Yeah, I think if he has it in his deck, he's going to go for it.
Yeah, and he's already gone by the Batterskull, which is obviously the bottom card of his deck, and now there's the Sword.
So Sword, Thopter, obviously an out for him, and a Terminus also, sort of the Terminus also is a way for him to stop Joe's army. So, yeah, it looks like he is definitely going for that Sword of the Meek. And since the Stoneforge resolved, the Sword of the Meek should probably resolve as well right now.
And there is the Sword. Banned in Modern. We can't have this combo walking around that format, much to Jerry T's chagrin.
And this is kind of why I think Joe might have been better off just slow playing it a little bit, because I think if you slow play it, you basically reduce Chris's outs to like almost none.
Yep.
Whereas now, obviously, Chris, his odds of winning are still slim, but they are still live.
Now, to be fair, you know, the other interesting thing here in this particular situation is that, you know, Joe might just be thinking, oh, I'm just up against like a version of my deck. I always play Miracles, so Chris decided maybe to copy me this weekend to try to get a leg up on the tournament. When in reality, you know, Chris has access to the Thopter Foundry combo that Joe doesn't have access to, and it's actually kind of does a nice job of breaking the mirror open.
Yeah, you don't know, you don't actually know what version of Miracles Chris is playing.
Because this isn't popular at all. Joe's going to draw the top, obviously. Test Snapcaster still in his hand. See how he wants to navigate this turn. We're working our way about 10 minutes here.
So he can swing over 15, dropping Chris down to 5.
That's what he's going to do. So the 3 angels and the Vendilion do come over. 15, as you did mention, will be the damage. VanMeter's going to go down to 5. And now we'll see how Joe wants to play a second main phase. Topping, Snapcaster mages if he's going to Snapcaster. What's he going to do it with? And he's, I thought maybe past the turn, but I think he's just asking how many cards are over there.
Yeah, so at this point, Chris, Terminus would be good. Really just wants that sort of Thopter Foundry, though.
Chris going to take a look at the bin here. He knows about Snapcaster Mage being in Lossett's grip.
And I think this, I'm not sure. Are we still at the end of Joe's turn?
Yeah, we're somewhere on Joe's turn, I believe. Obviously, Chris can't activate the Stoneforge Mystic right now, but what he's going to do is sacrifice fetch lands. I think at this point right now, he just needs to thin his deck as best he can to try to find the Thopter Foundry, because he's on a 1-outer at this point.
Well, he could put the Sword of the Meek in play, right? Off the Stoneforge Mystic.
Stoneforge came into play last turn.
Oh, that's right.
Hardcast,
that's what he searched for. So, he thins out his deck. He still has 1 sack land up in case he has a brainstorm, if he draws a brainstorm. But
see what this draw is.
Nah, just a land.
Yeah,
so
that's not going to do it. Chris is going to extend the hand, and Joe Lossett, the Miracle Master, is going to defeat Chris VanMeter in, we'll call it the mirror. 2 games to 0. Maybe teaching CVM a little lesson here.
Well, one of the key cards there was Entreat the Angels, and that's something that Chris does not have access to in his deck. So one of those really, I kind of like having at least 1 copy if you're going to play this type of deck, just because later in the game, it's a way for you to close the games out really quickly.
I was going to mention that, and you already did it for me, closing speed, which is a huge deal for this deck. And also, there are other things that Entreat does a really nice job of, too. When you're playing against Miracles, you always have to be cognizant of that card coming, and maybe it changes the way that you have to attack or maybe play the game, because at any moment, bang, Angels could just be coming into play. Yeah,
and obviously, Terminus is a card that can kind of keep that card in check. But again, I'm with you. It's one of those things, especially with Vendilion clicks and getting thrown around. Suddenly having to deal with 4/4 instant Angels, it's going to be tough for any deck to deal with.
And we can't forget either, the casting cost on Entreat the Angels certainly does matter. It gives you a 3-mana spell for counterbalance.
Yep.
So there are a lot of things that card does for the deck. It also closes out games pretty quickly, as Joe Lossett does win this one 2-0, 2-0, excuse me. Doesn't go to time for once in his life, but that's what next round's for. So